The moment of judgment. It was a bright morning at Los Angeles International Airport, the kind of morning that held a quiet energy, one where the world felt in motion yet somehow still. The hum of voices, the distant roar of planes preparing for takeoff, the clatter of suitcases being dragged across the polished terminal floor, it all felt like the orchestrated chaos of a world in constant motion. Jennifer Thompson stood in the first-class line, her hand gripping the handle of her designer briefcase as she looked around. The soft, familiar weight of it was reassuring, almost like a small anchor in a sea of busy passengers. She had worked for this moment. The perfection of her navy business suit, the careful application of makeup, the sharp edge of her perfectly pressed blouse. These were the outward symbols of her success. Every wrinkle in her life had been smoothed out by years of hard work and sacrifice. At 40, Jennifer had fought and clawed her way to the top. She was now a senior business consultant, a respected professional in a world that often looked down on women who tried to succeed in the corporate arena. She had spent years in meetings, climbing up the ladder, fighting against the biases that sought to put her down, proving that she was just as capable as any of her male counterparts. Her place in this world, this place in the first-class line, was not a fluke. It was the result of blood, sweat, and tears. She had earned it. The long hours, the time spent away from her family, the missed milestones in her daughter's life. It had all led to this. She had sacrificed more than most could imagine, and this moment, this seemingly simple flight, was a symbol of everything she had achieved. Jennifer was standing tall now, a quiet pride in her posture as she scanned the gate area. The sound of her heels tapping gently on the floor was the only noise that accompanied her thoughts. A businesswoman in control of her world. But in the midst of the daily hustle and bustle of the airport, she was about to face something she had never encountered before, a test that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. Her eyes wandered across the terminal, scanning the faces of the other passengers. Some were distracted, others glued to their phones, and many were hurriedly sipping their coffees. Everything seemed like it was unfolding as it should, until out of the corner of her eye, Jennifer noticed a tall figure walking confidently toward the first-class line. The man's stride was long, his steps purposeful, and yet there was something off about him. He was dressed in a faded t-shirt, loose jeans, and sneakers, completely out of place among the neatly tailored suits, polished leather shoes, and designer bags of the first-class passengers. Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she took in his appearance. In that instant, her mind raced with assumptions. He had to be in the wrong line. It was a mistake, surely. This man, dressed so casually, so plainly, simply didn't belong in the privileged space of first class. Jennifer's pulse quickened as she watched him approach the line, unbothered by the fact that he wasn't adhering to the unspoken code of first-class travel. She straightened her back, lifting her chin slightly. She had fought for this place. She had worked relentlessly to earn her position in the corporate world, and with it the little luxuries that came with it. No one had handed her anything. Every inch of her success had been earned, often through sheer determination and grit. The idea that someone might just waltz in, looking like they didn't care, made something inside her stir. How dare he assume he could bypass the order of things? Her thoughts shifted into action. Jennifer was no stranger to confrontation. She had navigated boardrooms where men in power had looked over her, dismissed her ideas, and underestimated her abilities. She had faced prejudice and condescension with a calm, composed demeanor, all while inwardly bracing herself to prove her worth. This moment, in some strange way, felt similar. This man, whoever he was making an assumption. He was assuming that he could simply step into her space, her world, without any regard for the rules. Jennifer stepped forward, her high heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, cutting through the air like the sound of a gavel striking. She cleared her throat, gathering the strength of her convictions, preparing herself to stand her ground. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm, carrying across the gate area. "I believe this line is for first-class passengers only." The words were out before she could stop them. They came from the place inside her that had spent years fighting to prove that she belonged. Fighting to prove she was worth more than the assumptions people had about her. Fighting to show that she could take a seat at the table. This was her table. She had earned her seat. And this man, who looked like he didn't even care, was threatening to take it from her. The tall man turned slowly toward her, his face partially hidden beneath the brim of a baseball cap. His movements were smooth, almost effortless, as though he was in no rush, like the world around him moved to his pace. His eyes met hers for a moment, and there was something in them, something soft, almost bemused, yet also full of quiet understanding. There was no anger, no frustration in his gaze, only calmness. Something about his presence seemed to fill the air with a weight that was difficult to ignore. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" he asked in a deep, gentle voice that seemed to soften the tension in the room. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jennifer's grip on her boarding pass tightened as she stood her ground. She had already made up her mind. She had already decided what was right, and she wasn't about to let some man, no matter how tall, take her place in line. But as the man's soft smile grew, something shifted in the air. The murmurs of the surrounding passengers began to grow, and Jennifer felt a subtle shift beneath her feet. The man, his calm demeanor, the way he seemed to effortlessly command the space around him, reminded Jennifer of something. She couldn't place it, not at first, but the sense of recognition was unmistakable. Still, she pushed it aside. She was too focused on her mission, too wrapped up in defending the space she had earned. "I'm sorry," she repeated, more insistently now, her words slightly trembling with a mix of pride and frustration. "I don't think you understand. First-class passengers are expected to follow certain standards. Your attire—" She trailed off, gesturing to his casual clothes, her words suddenly feeling empty in her mouth. And then, just as she thought she had him, he said something that stopped her cold. "I do have a first-class ticket, ma'am." The words hit her like a cold splash of water. It wasn't the answer she expected. Jennifer's pulse quickened as she stared at him, the earlier sense of certainty she had been so sure of slipping away. Was it possible? Had she been wrong? LeBron's calm and selfless response. The words he spoke were simple, yet they shook Jennifer to her core. "I have a first-class ticket, ma'am," the man said, his voice smooth and low, without a trace of anger or irritation. His calm demeanor, so starkly different from her own growing frustration, made her pause. For a moment, Jennifer's sharp confidence faltered and doubt crept in. Could she be wrong? It was a simple statement, but it carried a weight of unspoken truth that seemed to hang in the air. Jennifer, despite her years of professional experience, suddenly found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about people, about success, and even about herself. She was a woman who had spent years fighting for respect, climbing the corporate ladder one grueling step at a time. Every promotion she had earned was a testament to her relentless determination. She had fought against assumptions, against the stereotypes that women in her field often had to endure. She had proven her worth in a world that had been slow to recognize her potential. But now, in this moment, standing face to face with this man, it felt like the rules of the game she had spent her life mastering no longer applied. There was something about the man's presence that unsettled her. His quiet confidence, the way he carried himself with ease, as though he had nothing to prove. Jennifer had been so focused on asserting her right to this first-class seat, so caught up in the idea that she had earned it, that she failed to see what was standing right in front of her. A small flicker of recognition sparked in her mind, but she quickly pushed it away. She had a job to do. She had to protect her place in line. But then he spoke again. His voice was softer this time, carrying a note of vulnerability that Jennifer hadn't expected. "Actually," he continued, "there's something a little unusual about this situation." Jennifer's grip on her boarding pass tightened, her heart beginning to race. What could possibly be unusual? Was this man trying to play some kind of game with her? Her mind spun, trying to make sense of his words. "The unusual thing," he said, taking a step closer, "is that I was actually planning to give up my first-class seat today. There's a veteran over there who could use it more than I can." His hand gestured toward an elderly man in a wheelchair, a figure that had been quietly waiting by the gate. Jennifer's eyes followed his motion, and she felt a shift in her chest, a subtle tightening that made her feel small, almost ashamed. The realization washed over her like a wave. This wasn't just about a first-class seat. It was about something far deeper, something she had never truly considered. This man, who she had so quickly judged based on his appearance, based on her own rigid standards, was willing to sacrifice his own comfort for someone else, For a veteran, someone who had fought for this country, someone who had given so much of himself, and here Jennifer was, caught up in her own pride, unwilling to see the bigger picture. The weight of his words sank in. Jennifer had spent her career fighting for everything she had, every promotion, every seat at the table, but in this moment she realized that the true measure of success was not just about what you fought for, but what you were willing to give up. It wasn't about defending your position at all costs. It was about seeing others, understanding their needs, and being willing to let go of your own privilege when it was the right thing to do. Jennifer's mind reeled as she processed his offer, the quiet kindness in his words cutting through her sense of entitlement. She had misjudged him, and now, standing in the wake of her own assumption, she saw him for who he truly was, not just a man in casual clothes, but a man who embodied generosity, humility, and selflessness. The gate agent stepped forward, the tension palpable in the air, but Jennifer could barely focus on the conversation unfolding in front of her. Her mind was elsewhere, processing the quiet lesson she had just been handed. For the first time in a long time, Jennifer felt her carefully constructed walls of judgment begin to crumble. She realized that her assumptions about who deserved a place in first class, about what success looked like, had been nothing more than illusions. In that moment, Jennifer knew that the real greatness was not in the seat you occupied, but in how you treated others, how willing you were to step aside when it mattered, how much you could give, not just take. And as the man LeBron James, though she hadn't yet realized it, stood before her, still smiling softly, Jennifer understood. She had learned more about life and about herself in those few moments than she had in years of fighting for her place at the top. It wasn't about the seat you earned, it was about the heart you carried with you. Moment of recognition and regret. As LeBron James spoke, Jennifer felt a sharp pang of realization. Something deep within her that, until that moment, had remained hidden. Her heart sank as the layers of her assumptions began to peel away. The man she had dismissed as someone out of place, someone who, by all appearances, didn't belong in the same space as her, was not just any ordinary person. He was LeBron James, one of the greatest basketball players in history, a man who had achieved unparalleled success and global recognition. Yet here he was in the most casual of attire, preparing to give up his first-class seat for someone else. Someone who needed it more than he did. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as she watched him speak with the gate agent. He wasn't the arrogant celebrity she had assumed he was. He wasn't the entitled figure she had expected. No, he was something completely different. His humility, the ease with which he spoke, and the selfless nature of his actions hit Jennifer harder than she could have anticipated. She had always thought of herself as someone who worked hard for everything she had. She had believed that hard work, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of success were the ultimate values to be upheld. And yet, here was a man who had done far more than she ever could, who had reached heights of fame and fortune most could only dream of, and he was choosing to forego that privilege for the sake of another. The weight of the situation slowly settled over Jennifer, and with it an undeniable sense of regret. She had spent so much of her life fighting for respect, climbing through the layers of corporate life, convinced that every step she took, every promotion she earned, was a direct result of her sheer determination and hard work. She had justified her actions, her pride, by telling herself that she was better because she had worked harder than most, that she deserved everything she had because she had earned it. She believed that success was black and white. It was about who deserved what, about who worked the hardest to get there. But LeBron's quiet generosity shattered that illusion. What had she really been fighting for all these years? A seat at the table? A first-class seat on an airplane? Or had she been missing the point entirely? LeBron didn't need to prove anything. He had already earned his place in the world, not just through his athletic achievements, but through his generosity, his commitment to making the world better for others. The guilt hit her like a heavy wave as she realized how quick she had been to judge him. She had sized him up based on his clothes, his casual demeanor, dismissing him as someone who didn't meet her standards of success. But she had been wrong. In trying to protect her own carefully curated image of success, she had completely missed the bigger picture. Here was a man, someone who could have easily kept his first-class seat, who could have easily ignored the veteran in need, but instead, He was willing to step aside, to give up his privilege for someone who deserved it more. It was a humbling moment. The pride she had so carefully nurtured over the years began to feel foolish, almost childish. Jennifer had always been the one who fought to prove she belonged, to show that she was just as capable as anyone else in her field. She had thought her success was about proving her worth. But now, standing before LeBron, she realized that true worth wasn't defined by what you had earned, but by what you were willing to give. It wasn't about holding on to a seat for yourself, but about knowing when to let others take your place. Jennifer's mind raced with a flurry of emotions. Embarrassment, humility, regret, and a strange sense of admiration all wrapped into one. How had she missed this? How had she spent so many years thinking that success was about climbing higher, when perhaps it was about reaching down and lifting others up? She watched as LeBron continued to speak softly to the gate agent, making sure the veteran's needs were taken care of, showing nothing but kindness and care. The contrast between his actions and her own rushed judgment made her heart ache. She had spent her entire career fighting for respect, trying to earn everything she had, believing that her hard work was the only thing that mattered. But in this one moment, she realized how shallow her understanding of success had been. Her pride, her need to defend her place, suddenly felt so small. She had fought against assumptions all her life, but now she understood that true success wasn't just about breaking through barriers or proving yourself over and over again. It was about breaking down the walls that separated you from others. It was about seeing people for who they truly were, not for how they looked or what they had. It was about giving, not taking. As the gate agent handed him his boarding pass, Jennifer stood there, feeling the weight of her own mistake pressing down on her chest. She had missed an opportunity to see someone for what they truly were. She had judged him, dismissed him, and now, the realization of her error felt like a sharp sting. But it wasn't too late. This moment, this humbling encounter, was an opportunity for growth. Jennifer had a choice: to let her regret consume her, or to learn from it. To take it with her as a reminder that success wasn't about the seat you claimed for yourself. It was about how you treated the people around you, how you used your privilege, and how much you were willing to give. As she watched LeBron walk toward the jet bridge, his presence still commanding attention despite the quiet humility he carried, Jennifer felt something shift within her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she would never look at success or the people around her the same way again. Reflection on prejudices and assumptions. As Jennifer slowly made her way down the jet bridge, the weight of the encounter seemed to settle deeper within her. The quiet buzz of the gate area had been replaced by the soft murmur of passengers boarding the plane, yet her mind remained far from the ordinary noise of the moment. The man was still fresh in her thoughts, and his calm, selfless nature had left an indelible mark on her. How had she so quickly judged him based on his appearance? How had she allowed her assumptions about what success should look like to cloud her judgment? She had spent her entire career building a fortress of pride, of belief that her hard work and determination were the only things that defined her. The hours of sacrifice, the endless meetings, the decisions she made to keep climbing, all of it had been about proving herself worthy. But the irony of it all struck her sharply now. She had built this image of herself based on the idea of fighting for what she deserved, but in doing so she had missed what true success was. LeBron hadn't fought to prove his worth. He hadn't needed to. His success spoke for itself. But what he chose to do with that success, his willingness to give, to show humility, and to put others first, was a kind of greatness Jennifer hadn't fully understood until now. In the world she had lived in, success was always defined by tangible markers: promotions, wealth, status. She had convinced herself that first-class seats, expensive briefcases, and high-powered titles were what made her worthy of respect. It was about playing by the rules of a system that valued achievement above all else, a system that rewarded those who could fight their way to the top. She had taken pride in her place, believing that every step of her climb had been earned through grit, through an unwavering resolve to break through the glass ceilings she had encountered along the way. But now, standing on the brink of the plane, Jennifer felt the burden of her own prejudices. She had made assumptions about LeBron based on what he wore, based on how he appeared to others. She had judged him the same way others had often judged her, by the clothes on her back, by the way she presented herself in the business world. It had been easy to dismiss him because his clothes didn't fit the mold of what she thought first-class passengers should look like. Yet, what did any of that really mean in the grand scheme of things? She had spent so many years fighting against the stereotype of the businesswoman who didn't fit the mold, striving to be seen as equal in a world where women were still often underestimated. She had worked hard to earn respect in spaces that hadn't always welcomed her, but now she understood that in doing so, she had inadvertently built her own set of walls that separated her from seeing people for who they truly were. She had become so focused on the idea of earning her place in the world, on following the rules of achievement, that she had neglected the most important rule of all, to see others for their hearts, their actions, their kindness, and their humanity. LeBron had shattered that illusion with a simple gesture, giving up his first-class seat for a man who needed it more. In that moment, Jennifer understood what true greatness was. It wasn't about what you could accumulate or how high you could climb. It was about how you treated others along the way, how you used your position to lift others up. Jennifer had always been proud of the fact that she had fought against the odds to make it to where she was. She had fought against being underestimated, against the biases that sought to hold her back. But what she hadn't realized until now was that fighting against bias wasn't enough. True strength wasn't just in breaking through barriers. It was in knowing when to step back, when to be generous, and when to let go of your privilege in favor of something greater. It was in choosing humility over pride, in choosing to give instead of to take. As the flight attendant greeted her and led her to her seat, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted inside her. Her eyes flickered to the back of the plane, where LeBron had already settled into his seat. He looked completely at ease, flipping through the pages of a book with a quiet focus. The calmness of his demeanor stood in stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions churning inside her. Jennifer couldn't help but think back to her early years in the corporate world. She had been so driven, so focused on proving herself, that she had often overlooked the people around her. She had seen colleagues as competitors, business meetings as battles to win, and every interaction as an opportunity to assert her place in the world. But LeBron had shown her something she had missed, that the true measure of success wasn't in the battles you fought or the accolades you earned. It was in how you treated others, how you used your platform to make the world better, how you led not just through your achievements, but through your heart. Jennifer's thoughts turned to her daughter Emily and the lessons she had always tried to teach her. She had preached about standing up for what was right, about fighting for equality, about making sure that she had a seat at the table. But now Jennifer realized that the most important lesson was not about fighting for a seat at the table. It was about being the kind of person who would make room for others, who would give up that seat when someone else needed it more. As the plane began its ascent, Jennifer leaned back in her seat, her eyes gazing out of the window at the city below. The clouds drifted lazily by, and for the first time in a long while, Jennifer allowed herself to just breathe. She had spent so much time focused on her own struggles that she had forgotten to look beyond herself. This encounter with LeBron James, of all people, had changed something deep inside her. She realized now that it wasn't enough to simply fight for a place in the world. It was about the heart you brought to the table, the way you treated others, the way you used your success to lift people up rather than hold them down. And as the plane climbed higher into the sky, Jennifer made a quiet vow to herself, to never again forget that lesson, to never again judge a person by their appearance or assumptions about their worth, and to always remember that true greatness was found in generosity, not in position, self-realization and growth. As the plane settled into its cruising altitude, Jennifer sat quietly in her first-class seat, her gaze fixed out the window. The city below seemed distant now, almost like a different world, a place she had left behind, at least for the moment. The hum of the airplane, the soft murmur of voices from fellow passengers, and the clink of a flight attendant's cart were all background noise compared to the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Her hands, still gripping the armrests, trembled slightly, not from the usual turbulence, but from the weight of what she had just experienced. What had started as a simple confrontation at the gate had turned into a profound life lesson, one that was still unfolding in the quiet corners of her heart. She had entered this flight convinced of her place in the world, convinced that she had earned every inch of her success. She had fought so hard for it, climbed the corporate ladder, faced rejection, battled stereotypes, and proved herself over and over again. Her work had defined her, her identity had been shaped by her career, and the title Senior Business Consultant was her badge of honor. It was a symbol of the years of effort, of endless nights spent in meetings and at her desk, proving that she was capable, that she deserved to be there, sitting in first class. The seat she was now in, the seat she had claimed without question, was a victory, a reward for her persistence and determination. But now, as she stared at the clouds drifting past the window, she realized how limited her understanding of success had been. LeBron James had shown her something she hadn't even known she needed to learn, that true greatness wasn't defined by titles, positions, or accolades. It was defined by the way you used your privilege, your success, to help others. It was about humility, kindness, and the ability to recognize when someone else needed what you had more than you did. Jennifer had spent so many years trying to prove herself, but in doing so, she had forgotten the very essence of leadership and greatness: selflessness. LeBron had embodied this so effortlessly, so naturally. It wasn't just that he had been willing to give up his first-class seat for a veteran. It was the fact that he had recognized the opportunity to make someone else's life a little easier, a little better, simply by letting go of his own privilege. There was a quiet power in that, a strength that didn't need to be flaunted, a generosity that didn't need to be acknowledged by anyone other than the person who was giving. For years, Jennifer had associated success with personal achievement. She had believed that the more she achieved, the more she proved her worth to the world. She had been focused on the battle for recognition, for validation, believing that the more she climbed, the higher she would sit in the world. But now, in the silence of the plane, she began to see how misguided that view had been. Success wasn't about how high you could rise. It was about how deeply you could connect with others, how much of yourself you were willing to give away, how open you were to seeing beyond your own struggles to recognize the struggles of others. LeBron's quiet gesture of kindness had revealed to Jennifer the walls she had built around herself over the years. Those walls had been made of assumptions, pride, and the idea that she had to prove herself constantly. She had been so focused on earning her place that she had forgotten what it meant to truly lead, to set an example not just through success, but through the way she treated others. She had spent so much of her life proving that she belonged in the space she occupied, that she had never questioned whether her presence in that space was as much about her own needs as it was about the needs of those around her. Her thoughts drifted back to her daughter, Emily, and all the lessons she had tried to teach her about respect, about the importance of standing up for yourself, about fighting for what you deserve. But now Jennifer understood that the most important lesson was not about fighting to claim a place. It was about making room for others. It was about recognizing when you had more than you needed and choosing to give some of that away. It was about using your position to elevate those who needed help, not just securing your own spot at the table. Jennifer's heart ached as she thought about how much she had missed in her relentless pursuit of success. She had been so focused on breaking through the glass ceiling, on proving herself in a world that had so often underestimated her, that she had neglected to see the most important thing, that true leadership wasn't about asserting dominance, but about fostering compassion, understanding, and generosity. She had spent so many years trying to outshine others that she had forgotten the quiet strength that comes from lifting others up. The realization settled into her like a deep breath, one that had been long overdue. Jennifer understood now that real growth came not from constantly proving yourself, but from evolving. It came from recognizing the flaws in your own thinking, the ways in which your assumptions about the world had limited you. And it came from embracing the discomfort that comes with seeing yourself for who you truly are, not as the image you have built, but as the person you have the potential to become. Jennifer closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the peace of this new understanding to wash over her. She had been given an extraordinary gift in that moment with LeBron, a gift that went beyond the confines of a first-class seat. She had been given the chance to see herself, to see her life, through a different lens. And with that clarity came a deep sense of responsibility, one that she hadn't fully understood before. When the plane finally began its descent into New York, Jennifer felt a quiet sense of peace settle within her. She had arrived at her destination, physically, but emotionally, she had arrived at something far more profound. a new beginning. A beginning where success wasn't just about what she had earned, but about what she was willing to give away, to leave behind, and to share with others. It was about finding strength in humility, and in that humility, finding true greatness. As the plane touched down, Jennifer knew that her journey wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about becoming the kind of person who could help others climb too. As Jennifer sat back in her seat, reflecting on everything she had learned, she realized how transformative this moment had been. If you've ever found yourself so focused on your own journey, only to realize that true success isn't about what you've achieved for yourself, but how you uplift others, then you know exactly what Jennifer felt. If you've enjoyed this story and found it meaningful, please hit that subscribe button and join our community for more powerful stories like this one. Your support means the world to us, and we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation. Have you ever experienced a moment of realization that completely changed your perspective? Comment below and share your thoughts or your own story. Let's keep the discussion going. Thank you for being here, and remember, the greatest success comes from how we lift each other up.